Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Simple Living High Thinking, where we unpack Tukaram Prabhu's Friday night Bhagavad Gita class. I'm joined by Tadeo Souza. Thank you, Tadeo.
Haribo, thank you.
And I'm Kim Polander, and we are in chapter 10. So, Tadeo, what sort of context would you like to set up for today's episode?
That this text that we're going to cover today is so powerful because it includes text 10, chapter 10, text 8, 9, 10, and 11. These four verses together, 8, 9, 10, and 11, have been considered to be Krishna's summary of the entire Gita. So it contains so much of theology and bhakti and mercy, grace. There's so many concepts that are built into them. And this is where we are starting today. And so I wanted to mention that this is also not just us looking at these verses and thinking, hey, they sound great. It looks like it's a big summary of the whole text. But rather, it's been for many, many years, I would say for hundreds of years, many of our saints in our lineage have agreed that indeed this is the four texts which comprises the entire summary of the entire text. So these are very, very powerful and important texts of the text of the Bhagavad Gita. And we are super excited to be covering them today.
Yeah, I was surprised when we first started touching on these verses. I was surprised when Tukaram Prabhu mentioned that, these verses encapsulate the entire Gita, and I didn't realize that. So yeah, very important verses.
And also, something that came up in class is that Arjuna has a big reaction to these verses. And we will cover that also, how Arjuna responds. And so far, Krishna has been talking since about 2.5 chapters. It was in the beginning of chapter 8, I believe, that Arjuna asked questions. But then it's just the very beginning of the chapter where Arjuna is asking 6 questions. And then Krishna spends the rest of chapter 8 answering those questions. And then all of chapter 9, Krishna is talking. And then now up to text 8 of chapter 10, Krishna still talking, and Arjuna is only listening. And so another reason why we do accept these four texts to be a summary by Krishna is because Krishna, again, has been talking for a while. And then as all the elegant speakers, you conclude what you've been discussing so far in a very powerful manner, which is to say you are encapsulating everything that you have expanded on at this point to this point, but very concisely and summarized and containing all the powerful messages that you have already spoken about. And so this is what Krishna is doing here. That's another reason why we believe this to be the four verses that really summarizes the Gita, because Krishna wanted to. He did it. He did that himself. And then also something else that happens is that Arjuna's reaction is triggered also by what we can. Uh, it is implied. We can deduct from what's going on in the text that Krishna paused a little here at this point. Again, not only because he again summarized everything that he has been speaking about so far, but then Arjuna starts speaking all of a sudden with a very strong reaction. And that takes about, let's see, 6 texts that Arjuna is reacting. And then at the end of the 6 texts, which Arjuna expresses his reactions, he asks Krishna, please tell me more. Continue to talk to me, tell me more, which again implies that Krishna did pause for a moment to then he gave Arjuna that moment to react, and Arjuna does react. We're going to be covering that. And at the end of his reaction, he says, "Hey, tell me more. Like, don't stop there, you know." And so all of these are indications that indeed these four texts are very powerful.
Oh, yeah. I like that you brought that up about the format of the Gita and paying attention to those small details. Like, oh, because I would not have thought about that. I just kind of think, even when it was first brought up, that, oh, the Gita is based on the traditional process of questions and answers. And Krishna's been talking for a while, but it really gives importance and a credence to what Arjuna is saying, because he hasn't spoken up that much. And so I like that you brought that up. It kind of sets the tone and sets the stage for these texts.
Right. Okay, so then let's go for it. So text 8, the first of the four, Krishna says, "I am the source of all spiritual and material worlds. Everything emanates from me. The wise who perfectly know this engage in my devotional service and worship me with all their hearts." Text 9, "The thoughts of my pure devotees dwell in me. Their lives are fully devoted to my service, and they derive great satisfaction and bliss from always enlightening one another and conversing about me." Text 10, "To those who are constantly devoted to serving me with love, I give the understanding by which they can come to me." And text 11, "To show them special mercy, I, dwelling in their hearts, destroy with the shining lamp of knowledge the darkness born of ignorance." And so these verses are just so beautiful in themselves. And there are just so much there that is packed in. And I think we should spend some time unpacking them. What are your thoughts on this text so far, Kim?
Yeah, sounds good. Lead the way.
All right. So I am the source of all spiritual and material worlds. Everything emanates from me. Okay. So that's something is going on here, because Krishna is the supreme person. And we have heard people that are very good at speaking, such as Barack Obama, Malcolm X, public speakers that do a phenomenal job and are very charismatic, and they're not redundant. They speak very clearly. They make one point. They make that very point very. They make a point very well, and then they move on. So to be redundant begs the question, why is this person being redundant? Do they not believe that what they said at first was clear? Do they feel like they have to restate their points again because it wasn't clear the first time? Like, what is the reason for somebody being redundant? And so Krishna certainly would not be redundant. And it seems that there's a lot of redundancy here, because if you say, "I am the source of all material and spiritual worlds," okay, then you say, "Everything emanates from me." That's a lot of redundancy here. You already stated that you are the source of everything. Then what's the point in saying everything emanates from me? And so we want to discuss this because it's quite powerful too. In Sanskrit, it's a little bit different than in English. Again, Sanskrit is very technical and very appropriate for spiritual matters, subject matters. And to translate them into English is really tough to encapsulate everything that is being said. But in Sanskrit, it would more, it would be closer to saying everything, I am the source of everything and everything emanates from me, which highlights the redundancy here that we are discussing. In English, um, I'm definitely not qualified to overguess Prabhupada to understand what it is that he had in mind and what his intentions were. But I would imagine that he too picked up on this potential redundancy that is so much more clear in Sanskrit, and he wrote that in English a little bit different, which does not deviate from the actual meaning, but the redundancy is not so apparent, right? If you read, I am the source of all material and spiritual worlds, period. And then you say, everything emanates from me. The redundancy is not so clear. But if you say, I am the source of everything and everything emanates from me, then it's clear. And the Sanskrit is written more like that, that the redundancy is clear. So the question here, why is that? Why is Krishna being redundant here? And again, because in Sanskrit, things are so much more technical, and and Krishna is trying to make a point that indeed he is the source of everything. And that point is it's important for Krishna. So he's trying to cover all grounds and make sure that nothing is left alone. That he's really trying to communicate to us that uh, that everything is dependent on him. He's the source of everything. Now, if we analyze that very deeply, we can consider that, well, in the universe, we have matter and we have all these planets and we have the stars and so on. And when we say everything, I'm the source of everything, then Krishna would have to be the source of all the matter, all the material substance that comprises the different planets and stars and our bodies. In other words, water, earth, air, fire, etc. So Krishna is saying, I'm the source of all of that. Okay. However, as we observe our world, matter isn't just stagnating or static. It's also moving. For example, the planets, they're moving around the sun. And so what is that? Like, what is that? There seems to be yet another force. There's the force that would have created matter, where matter came from, but matter would just sit there and not move. But yet we observe that matter is moving. We have these planets in orbit and we are going around the sun in a tremendous velocity. Actually, we just don't feel it. So what is that force? That force is quite different from the gross matter itself. It's like, what is it, right? What is it that keeps, obviously we call it gravity, but then what is gravity? Like, what is this force that keeps things in motion? And that's what Krishna, in the Sanskrit, is much more closer to the, when we say everything emanates from me in English, in the Sanskrit, it really points towards the force that moves everything. So that's, in English we're saying everything emanates from me, but in Sanskrit it's closer to the force that moves things. So not only everything comes from me, is Krishna saying here, all the matter that is necessary to create everything that we see in the universe, but also their motion. Like, don't think that there are two super powerful things: Krishna, from whom everything comes, but then something else that has another, that is independent, that is not dependent on Krishna. And this something else is responsible for the movements and the animation of all the matter that we see in the world. That would be two different, very powerful things. But Krishna is owning everything. He's trying to make sure that we don't even think that way, that the matter comes from him, but what animates matter is something else, something that is not dependent on Krishna, something independent from Krishna. But no, even that force that causes that matter that comes from Krishna to animate and move, that force is also coming from Krishna. So Krishna is really trying to make a strong point here that not only he's the source of everything, but even the force that animates everything is his. So it's a very strong point that Krishna is trying to make, suitable to the opening statements of such powerful verses, this four powerful verses that we are digging into right now. This is like a very suitable opening. Like, let's make sure that there is no misunderstanding. I am everything, not only the matter that you see, but even the energy that causes this matter to be in motion. I'm that as well.
Yeah, that's a really interesting distinction because I can see how you were alluding to how it would be easy to say, okay, well, Krishna created the world and then he's sitting back in his lounge chair and just kind of observing everything. And then that's where, oh, evils came up in this area or this person, and that didn't come from, it's not tied to Krishna in any way, or the tree growing outside. It's like that's just some natural evolutionary process. But this idea of keeping things in motion, all of our operations, so to speak, is still tied to Krishna, not just the creation. So I I would not have caught that he's making that distinction. So yeah, I like that.
Yeah, also in from a very superficial understanding, especially people in the Western world, they will look at Hinduism, and it's difficult to understand because it's very complex. The scriptures are, in Sanskrit, and they're ancient and so on. And is the theology there is quite different than the theology in the West. But from a very, very, very high level, we can say Hinduism has three predominant deities. And I'm being careful with the words I use here, but let's say these three predominant deities would be Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. And so their respective responsibilities would be to create the universe, that's Brahma, and then to maintain the universe, that's Vishnu, and then to destroy the universe, and that's Shiva. And so that is also captured here. If Brahma creates, then the energy is coming from him, like the what is necessary to create the ingredients that is necessary for creation, well, then Brahma is responsible for. So those ingredients are coming from him. But then Vishnu is the one that maintains it. And that's where that kind of gets close to, right? Like, how is it being maintained? How is it that after creation, things are still in motion, things are still growing, plants, nature that we see, they're still like the waves in the ocean, like what animates all of what we see, the wind blowing the air, like how is that happening? And we could attribute that to Vishnu, or he's the maintainer. So that's a separate force that is maintaining things. But in a more logical and theological way, these three predominant deities aren't, they're not all three God. There is only one God. There is a monotheistic theology that we ascribe to, and that is Krishna, from whom everything comes, not only the creation, but also the maintenance. And even the destruction, everything is coming from Krishna. And he's, again, opening it up with a very strong argument that I am everything. And then he proceeds to say, so I'm the source of everything, everything emanates from me. And then he says, the wise who perfectly know this engage in my devotional service and worship me with all their hearts. To me, it begs the question, why? Uh, like, if I know that Krishna is everything, again, if we look at it in context, we are talking about these four verses, and we are saying they are a summary of everything that has been discussed so far. And so we can look at them obviously within context of the Gita, because they're, chapter 10, it's towards the middle of the text. But if it is a summary of everything, we can look at this text independent from everything else, because everything is contained in there. So this is like we're starting over. I'm the source of everything, everything emanates from me. Now, if I know this, despite everything we have heard so far in the Gita, if I have only been told that there is a supreme source of everything and that everything emanates from that supreme source, and if I know that perfectly, why would I engage in that supreme source devotional service and worship that source of everything with all my heart? Because now there's my emotions are there, like I'm worshiping that source in devotional service, but I'm doing it with all my heart. Like I'm in love with that source and I'm worshiping them. So what are your thoughts on that, Kim?
You made a really good point right there at the end about the emotion of it. That's interesting, because in my mind, the reason someone would worship someone, let's say if we looked at the text and it said, the wise who know this engage in my service instead of devotional service, and just worship me instead of worship me with all their hearts, it really creates two distinct reactions where one is, okay, you have this knowledge of this being is God. Okay, that being's God. I'm going to do all these rituals and do things to appease that God, and then I'll be good. But the idea of the ultimate goal being love, and not only that, but intimate love with Krishna, then it brings in this whole emotional aspect. And so you think of, like Tukaram Prabhu brought up an interesting point in class. This was a long time ago, where he said, if God, if Krishna exposed himself to us with our, earthly eyes, where we could see him just like we see our iPhone, we would drop to the ground and there'd be, I mean, game over. We'd have no choice but to worship him. And in doing that, it would essentially take away a lot of our free will in deciding to worship him. That's why you hear these stories of CEOs who, disguise themselves as just a regular worker, or people with a lot of money who don't necessarily want to say that they have a lot of money when they start dating someone, because then all of a sudden they're going to love you for, reasons that are not as genuine, whereas someone is ultimately seeking someone to love them for love's sake. So I really like that point of calling out the emotional aspect of it.
Yeah, and then I'm thinking, what are the triggers in knowing that someone is the source of everything and that everything emanates from that source? What would trigger me? Again, like you said perfectly, to then serve that source is quite logical because that's such a powerful being. Everything emanates from that person. The person is the source of everything. So I will understand it and I will serve that person. But then I'm serving the person with love. To me, and it's this is just me saying, I haven't heard this from any of our teachers, just as a disclaimer, but I am basing my opinion on the rest of the text, which is so beautiful. The rest of this chapter, I meant to say, which is so beautiful, where Krishna will go into explain to Arjuna how is it possible for us to see him in the natural world. Krishna is going to be saying things such as, I am the sun, I am the light of the sun and the moon, right? I am the strength in all strong man. I am the tasting water. Krishna is going on to tell us how we can see him in the natural world. And so to me, this is a foreshadowing of those points, that when we see beauty in the world, we can understand that that beauty had a creator. And how beautiful must the creator be if the creation is already so beautiful? And if we truly try to understand our position in the world, in the universe, we would recognize that this is the best possible universe for us, is the best possible situation that we find ourselves in. We have free will, so we are not forced to do anything that we don't want to. We have a feedback mechanism that will alert us when we are going off track. That is called suffering, pains and sufferings. We understand that due to the laws of karma, when we are suffering, when we are experiencing things and really not go our way, it is a sign. It is a very kind sign, in fact, because it could be much worse. Sometimes the sufferings that we experience is a minimized version from what we truly deserve. Devotees feel that way, that Krishna is only giving me 1% of what I actually deserve. And yet that feedback mechanism is there. And it is usually when we've done something that is objectively wrong, then you suffer the consequences. And then you also have the opportunity to learn from those mistakes and then engage in something that is objectively good. For example, to love everything and everyone, and to care for another with compassion. Those things are quite objectively good. And so, in my experience in the world, I feel that when I'm doing something wrong, not only I know I'm doing something wrong, but I'm also going to, at one point or another, suffer the consequences for what I've done. And there's this very caring feedback mechanism that will alert me from that and allow me to become a better person. And then there's also death, which is it's quite difficult to look at it from a death being good perspective. But with a clear and sincere heart, I will say the following, that when you see an old body, that's that's a tricky situation. I'm saying like an old body, like a 95 to 100 and something body. If you see a person in that state, like walking with great difficulty or sitting down, this is a very interesting predicament for the soul to be in such a old body. There's so many limitations. There's so many things that are going on in there that are not desirable. Old age. But then death comes and it gives you a whole new opportunity to start over and to start fresh, to hopefully learn from all the mistakes you have done by having that very subtle feedback mechanism. And then now you have a blank state and you can start over in a brand new body, in a perhaps in a better situation, and continue to make more spiritual progress. So when Christians say, I'm the source of everything and everything is emanated from me, like everything, like we already discussed, Krishna is owning everything, including karma, the fact that we die and we are born again to start over and learn and carrying the lessons with us. The lessons that we have learned, they are accessible to us in future lives. And so if I start contemplating the system in which we live, it is clear to me that the person who created it truly wanted it what was best for me. Because not only, like you said, Kim, if he was to present himself fully in front of us, we would lose our free will and we would be forced to love him. And that would not be the best version of love. But yet he separates himself from us enough that allows us to act with our true free will, but never leaving us completely alone because we have suffering as a feedback mechanism. And he knows that we would be hard headed and that we wouldn't understand things very nicely, that it would take us a long time. And time there is. So entropy, there, the entropy is there. So things would naturally get old. And so we were our body. And then when our body get old and we didn't learn, what is that then? You're gonna go to hell forever? That would not be a good person. But rather, he would take you from this old body and puts you in a new body where you can try again and again and again and again and again until you get it, until you act right and go back to the spiritual world where we come from. So if I analyze this system, and Krishna is owning everything, saying everything emanates from me, I'm the source of everything, including the system, the way things are set up, I conclude that we live in the best possible world. The best possible universe is the one in which we live because of all these reasons that we just talked about. And so I will fall in love with that person. I will recognize that the person has been so good, created such a system for me. And not only I will serve them, which is a natural reaction from understanding that everything is owned by that one person, but I will serve them with love because this is a very great system meant for my own benefit. And I'm so grateful to that person. And I will worship that person and I will serve them with all my heart.
Yeah, and I like how you've repeatedly emphasized that it's the best of all possible worlds, like the best system. And that also, the system is for our benefit, because I'm sure a lot of people would feel like this, all I'm getting is suffering. I don't see the benefit of this system. And so it brings up a lot of questions, and what I've loved about this philosophy from the beginning is that it never shies away. Tukaram Prabhu never shies away from the tough questions in life, such as okay, based on what you just said, uh, I don't know if I believe that having amnesia every lifetime, starting over is the best. Like, if I'm supposed to learn my lessons, why can't I just remember everything from all my past lives when I come into this life? Then wouldn't I learn quicker and be a better person? And so, how would you answer that question? You know, for anyone who's listening who might be struggling with that or question that.
I love that question because it's again, it's very difficult, like you said, and it's not clear. And to bring clarity to these difficult questions is the intention of all qualified teacher, such as Tukaram. And fortunately, we've heard from him and we can repeat. And so we can never forget that there are two sides to the coin at every time. There isn't only one side. We cannot say that, well, why can't I remember all the good things, the good lessons, let's say, that I have done in my past lives, in my subsequent lives? Why do I have to start from zero? That's your question, right? If I understood correctly.
Yes, yeah.
But that's not where it would end. You would also have to remember all of the mistakes that you've made, all the pains and suffering that you've caused to others. So all the ways in which you were wrong, you would also have to deal with that. You wouldn't just be, all right, let's just take the good and get rid of the bad, and I'll keep the good and go on to another life, let's say, and start from there. No, how about the bad? The bad stuff you would also be aware of. And if I just take inventory of my own life, I have regrets of things that I have done in my life. Thankfully, none of them are extremely bad to the point where I couldn't recover and forever be depressive about the mistakes I've made. But I have made them, and I'm aware of them. And I wish I didn't. I wish I knew better back in those days that then I wouldn't commit those mistakes. And so let's stretch that. Let's imagine how much of a bubble we would be living in. There would be, okay, before we move forward, let me take a step back here. In our scriptures, it is said that we have taken innumerable lifetimes. I think we covered this in a previous podcast. That is unusual. Our scriptures don't usually say innumerable of something because they actually number things. For example, the lifetime of Lord Brahma, it is 15 trillion years old. He lives to be 15 trillion years. And so our scriptures, they're like doing the math. Like, what would it be like to live? Like, what does 15 trillion mean? Like, I have a difficult concept wrapping my mind around a billion. Like, a billion is like so many millions, there's like 999 millions, and then like 900 millions is already so much. And then you get to a billion, that's a big number. And then to get to a trillion, there's so many billions in a trillion. So this is really big numbers. And yet we are still talking about it if it's like up to 15 trillion, right? So that's a big number. But sometimes our scripture will say, you know what, that's innumerable because the number is so high that we're not even going to mention it because it's so outside of our capability to grasp how big that number is that we might as well just say innumerable and think about it as being infinite. It's not infinite, it's finite, but it's innumerable. Like, you can't grasp it. It's just too big of a number because up to 15 trillion, we're still digging in there and try to grasp it. So our scripture says that we have taken innumerable lifetimes. So that's a lot. That's a lot of lifetimes, not only in human bodies, but also in animal bodies. Now, imagine that you are a hyena and you're attacked by a vicious lion, and that was the end of that lifetime. You want to remember that? Like, how are you going to deal with that in your future lives? Now, imagine that you are, I don't know, a small tiger and a dinosaur came and ripped your limbs apart. Do you want to remember that? How about if you were in a human form and you were completely consumed by anger and hatred and you murdered somebody, like in innumerable lifetimes, over trillions and trillions of lifetimes, it's quite possible that you were seduced by anger, deep anger and hatred, and committed such abominable acts in the past. How are you going to live? I mean, psychologically speaking, we already know people that depression, people feel so hopeless because they feel like they cannot do anything. And then they go in a darker corner of depression more and more and more. The bubble that I would have, that the bubble that I would have find myself in, if I had remembers, if I had memories of everything that I've done that is bad, everything that has happened to me that was bad, both in human and animal forms, and and then now I have memory of all of that in this current state of mind, it would completely overwhelm me. I would be completely paralyzed. I would be super freaked out to walk out in the streets and have some kind of ego come and chop my head off, or to go out in a nice hiking trail, fearing that some lion is going to come and rip my intestines out again, like it happened before. I would be completely paranoid. I would be completely paralyzed. So to actually forget everything and start over from scratch with free will is an extraordinary blessing from a person who really loves you. They allowing you to forget all the bad stuff that happened to you. Sure, you're gonna forget the good things, but you don't truly lose them all. In fact, Krishna has already said in the Gita that you actually pick up from where you left in terms of your spiritual progress. It is not that you remember from your memory, but the circumstances in which you were born is such that they're going to be conducive for your further spiritual progress. Like in a life, in a family of spiritualists, that where your basic needs are already met, in a country, in a place where things are all suitable. So all the conditions are proper for you to continue right from where you left. But you have to then continue yourself. And so this is a blessing. Did I answer that question properly, Kim?
Oh, yeah. Thank you very much. You did a really nice job. I liked how you emphasized, okay, so you want to remember your past lives. What about the bad? And like you said, some people are so debilitated by depression or regret in this life. Imagine if you remembered a million lives, that would be completely paralyzing. So yeah, it's a blessing. And I like what you mentioned about picking up where you left off, where in the next life, okay, you're learning the lessons. The next life, you get your basic needs met and you're set up more for an even better spiritual life or a more intimate relationship with God. So it's a perfect system.
The I've heard from authoritative and bona fide psychologists that post-traumatic syndrome disorder, what is it called again?
Oh, post-traumatic stress disorder.
Post-traumatic stress disorder. That we, people that are not trained in psychology or that don't know people that suffer from that disorder, they believe that people that do have that disorder is because they saw something that created such a big impact in their minds, and now they cannot forget that something, and that's why they have a post-traumatic stress disorder. So I still have the stress of that traumatic experience I had, and now it's past that and I'm having a disorder because of that. But actually, according to bona fide psychologists, and all of their peers and all of their studies and all of their numbers that they put together, 80% of all people that suffer from such disorders, they are suffering from these disorders not because of something they saw or something that was done to them. Rather, they're suffering from this disorder because of something they did, and they can live with themselves. They got to a place where it was so dark within themselves, and they were consumed by hatred and anger to such an extent that their reaction is something that completely bewilders them right now and overwhelms them. So they are remembering what they themselves did to somebody else, and they cannot forget that. And that is actually the cause of their post traumatic stress disorder. And not something that was done to them or that they saw, but rather something they did. And usually people that go to war have that because, prior to going to war, being recruited by the military, you are a regular citizen worrying about, the football game, or is it Friday yet? Is it Saturday yet for us to have fun? Then you recruited. Then you are this honorable soldier. Okay. Then you say goodbye to your family. Well, that's not nice. And then I go to this foreign country. I don't know anybody, but I'm here and I have this gun. And then now, I've been ambushed. And then there's all these people that I don't even know, and they have really powerful machinery, and they're going to kill me. And then I have this big, powerful machinery. So I'm going to kill them before they kill me. And that's what I've been trying to do. And then suddenly you're doing that. You went from worrying about the football game and eating hot dogs to now annihilating people that you don't even know. Like, that's not you. Like, you're not meant to do that. Like, I'm over here killing people, and who knows what happens in such circumstances, right? And then like if it's, especially if it's one-on-one combat and you have a knife or something, and then you're struggling for your life, you're going to be driven to do things that was never in your nature, that you never felt capable of doing under normal circumstances. And then you come back from such an experience, you can never let go. You are disturbed in your mind for a long time, and then you spend the rest of your life suffering and struggling with this. So then now, again, what to speak of if you remember all of the past lives and everything you've done, you cannot cope with it. And so to actually forget everything and start over is an extraordinary blessing, again, from a person who really cares about you, who created a system that is really meant to help you. And then now you should serve that person with all your heart because the person truly cares about you.
Yeah. Yeah. Such a nice reflection. Thank you.
And then the next text, it's okay. What does it look like? So Krishna is saying, I'm the source of everything. Everything emanates from me. The wise who perfectly know this engage in my devotional service and worship me with all their hearts. Well, then the question is, what does that look like? Like engaging in my devotional service and worshiping me with all their hearts. What would that be like? That's text 9. The thoughts of my pure devotees dwell in me. Their lives are fully devoted to my service, and they derive great satisfaction and bliss from always enlightening one another and conversing about me. So first of all, their thoughts are in me. So it's so easy in our lives, right? We have something that we're really attracted to, that we really like, and that we're constantly thinking about that thing. Like early phases of relationships, when you first meet a person and everything's so nice and you cannot help but to think about the person all the time, or some really far out experiments that you're doing if you're a scientist and you're about to arrive at the conclusion. You've been working on something for so long and everything is coming together, all your theories all coming together, and then you're about to discover something. Like, you're excited, the next day you wake up, you want to get right back to it, or like if you're a politician and you have great chances of winning, and then today is the voting day, and then it's like you're so like that thing cannot come out of your mind because you're so excited, you're so into it that your thoughts dwell on that object or on that person. So that's what Krishna is pointing to here. The thoughts of my pure devotees dwell in me. Like, we're not thinking about anything else. In our mind, with great excitement, we're thinking about Krishna. And their lives are devoted to my service. So my life, if my life is devoted to something, that's saying a lot, right? Like, I would devote my entire life to that one something. And my entire life is devoted to Krishna's service. Like, I want to see Krishna happy. I want to put a smile on Krishna's face. So everything I do is to fulfill that purpose. And then now here, and they derive great satisfaction and bliss from always enlightening one another and conversing about me. So now the picture that is being painted here is that just like you and I are doing now, Kim. We're here talking about Krishna, and we're enlightening one another about Krishna. And I like this. I can do this for a long time. I can sit here and talk about our philosophy and talk about Krishna, talk about the Gita for hours and hours and hours. And and I like it. And I do derive great satisfaction from doing this. But the one thing that was very interesting here that I want to point out that Tukaram mentioned in class, the word for bliss here is very esoteric. It's like it's very close to the root, the Sanskrit root of kama, which is really uh, a lot of the times is linked to lust. And so to communicate actual physical pleasure. And so there are two parts of, let's say, happiness. You could be truly satisfied. Again, let's say you just had a meal that is really nourishing, and you eat that, and then you're no longer hungry, and then you sit in a state of satisfaction. It's more passive. You're just satisfied. You are peaceful. You're not hankering about something you don't have because you are grateful for what you have. You're peaceful and you're satisfied. Well, that's one thing. But another thing is like the excitements of doing something, the excitements of, let's say, to really capture what I'm trying to say, let's say sexual enjoyment. Like that sexual enjoyment is different than satisfaction, it's more active. It's more like you're engaging and you're feeling something and you are really feeling blissful. So there is a satisfaction, which is more passive, more content. You're not hankering for anything else. You've got what you wanted. But then there's this other part, which is more exciting, enticing. It's agitating and it's more passionate. And that's bliss. So Krishna is capturing both here. Just like the first text, he was only everything comes from me, everything emanates from me. Now here he's saying, hey, when you are conversing about me with one another, you're going to derive great satisfaction, meaning you're not going to feel that there isn't something better to be talking about. You're satisfied. You're talking about Krishna, you're talking about the supreme topic. And there are no other topics that are better than that. Or let's say like a very fun and popular movie that just came out. Oh, let's talk about Krishna for a while, but now let's talk about Game of Thrones or something else. Or like what's going to happen with the dragons and something like that, right? No, you're satisfied that I'm talking about Krishna and I'm satisfied that there's nothing else that I'd rather be talking about it. But I'm just satisfied. But then the bliss, that's leading into this other aspect. You actually feeling with your senses. It is described that your hair will stand on end, like tears will come out of your eyes. You actually feeling something at your physical being. And Krishna is capturing them both here. When you're talking about Krishna, you derive great satisfaction and bliss. So both are there simply by talking about Krishna, thinking about Krishna and talking about Krishna will give you this both satisfaction and bliss. Did you, what were your thoughts when I took around covered these 2 points in class, Kim? Did you have a realization on that too?
Yeah, not as distinctive as what you just said. Mine was more general of, well, kind of how you referenced when you have something better, then you're not so consumed with something lower. Of we can all relate to the idea of, oh, I'm dating someone new. I just want to talk about them all the time. Talk about what they're thinking, what they're going to do, what we're going to do together, blah, blah, blah. Or like you said, a really great movie or a TV show that you just want to talk about. When you're inspired and that comes so naturally, then you just can't help but derive a lot of satisfaction and pleasure. So it's not something that can be so easily faked. One could force themselves to read the Bhagavatam every night or listen to lectures 24/7, but it wouldn't be sustainable if it's not coming from a natural place of inspiration. So to me, it's just something when I strive for that intimate relationship with Krishna to experience that, what it's like. It's something that's so natural that I can't force it. It's just something that's going to happen naturally. And that's kind of the approach personally that I've taken is because in the beginning, when I first came to Krishna consciousness, I was kind of more obsessed about how do I get to this place? How do I of this natural inspiration and love and I'm realizing, oh, it's just kind of a natural process that happens with more knowledge, comes more devotion, comes more service, comes more inspiration. So
Mhm. Yeah. So another way I thought about it was this, that if we think about suffering being negative numbers and ecstatic excitements being positive numbers, but we still have zero, which is neutral. It's neither negative nor positive. And so if you are in a state of suffering, experiencing, let's say, negative numbers, to move up towards zero, you and you get there now, you're gonna be like satisfied because you are a zero. You're no longer experiencing those pains and sufferings from negative numbers, let's say. And then you get to a state of being zero, you now have peace and you are a zero and you're satisfied because your suffering is over. But you are a zero. But then now the positive numbers is something different. Is something that is going to get you excitement and bliss and pleasure. So it is different than just being a zero. It is actually moving towards +1, +2, +3. And that is different. That is excitement. That is actually feeling something good as opposed to just being satisfied by not having something bad, right? And so Krishna is capturing them both here, saying that when we engage in talking about him, we get both satisfaction and bliss simply by talking about him. What a great system. All right. And then 10 is now what Krishna will do. So text 8, Krishna is saying who he is. Text 9 is that if you know him like that, then what you will do. And then text 10 now is what Krishna will do. And so text 10, to those who are constantly devoted to my service, to serving me with love, I give the understanding by which they can come to me. Now that's, again, this text, these four texts together here, they're so packed. That's a very interesting point here that Krishna is making, especially because he starts this chapter by saying, what is it? Neither the hosts of demigods nor the sages know my origin or opulences, for in every respect, I am the source of the demigods and sages. Now, demigods are a lot higher than we are, and so are the sages. And Krishna is saying, all of them, the hosts of demigods and sages, they don't know me. And if the demigods and sages are so much wiser and higher than we are, then how can we know Krishna? And this is what this text is speaking to. Krishna is saying, to those who are constantly devoted to serving me with love, I give them their understanding by which they can come to me. It is not that suddenly we become this, by our own merit, we become this very intelligent being and we can now fully understand God and love him. It is not. It is rather Krishna's mercy. Krishna's grace. Krishna is recognizing that, hey, you are a pure devotee. You've understood that everything comes from Krishna, everything emanates from Krishna. You are serving Krishna with all your heart. You're thinking about Krishna, you're talking about Krishna. Well, Krishna reciprocates. He's a perfect lover. This is what we mean by having a perfect relationship with a perfect person. And so what does his reciprocation look like? It looks exactly like this. Krishna will give us the understanding by which we can go to him. This is the purpose of life, to go back to where we came from. And Krishna will intervene and he will give us that understanding by which we can come to him. So now this is what Krishna is doing. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree. This verse is so packed. You could go in so many different directions. It brings up, initially when I read it, I was thinking about partiality of Krishna, or if Krishna can give us understanding, why doesn't he just give us a little more understanding? How does he determine how much understanding and enlightenment he gives us? And so that's so way above my pay grade, and only a supreme being would be able to determine that kind of system of what is good for us to know, what do we need to know, what's going to help us. Let's say we're in a rut or we're stagnating a little bit, what's going to help us push through. And so this idea of reciprocation that you brought up, I really like, because sometimes, at least for me, coming from this traditional background when I grew up, this traditional idea of Christianity's belief of, oh, God's just this being who's not really, it's not really an intimate relationship of love. At least that's not what I was taught. And God is so far removed from me. And so it's just up to me to continue to plod along and try to, you know, commit my life to God. And it's just a very lonesome kind of experience. Where here, what you were pointing out about the reciprocity and Krishna helping us along the way, and we're never, and giving us the enlightenment that we need. That idea of giving us enlightenment, it just blows my mind a little bit. Like, wow, it's just based on the grace of God that he knows what I need, what will help me, when I can handle the information, or when it'll just go in one ear and out the other. So most of the time, I'm just not qualified for anything. So every little bit helps, and Krishna determines what that little bit is and when.
Very well put. You brought up a lot of potential issues with the text as well. That if he can't give it, then why doesn't he give it, right? And how much to give? So all of those things are so packed in this text. I just want to mention, we talk about free will a lot. I just want to touch on this one point you made about, well, if Krishna can give us the understanding by which we can come to him, and if he's all good and all powerful, then why doesn't he? Why does he allow us to just be here suffering? And again, it goes back to the idea of free will, because if Krishna forcefully comes and he gives us all this understanding, he just took our free will away. We don't really have the choice to choose him, but rather he is injecting in us understanding of him, which will nullify our free will, because we won't be able to make a choice. We were just going to follow that. And it is no longer personal. It's like, might as well create a robot with artificial intelligence and say, hey, think that I am the bomb, right? Think that I am the most perfect person. And then the robot is just going to think that. And so, what kind of feelings do I have for such a robot? No, that I have to actually choose Krishna. This is like a personal relationship. And if Krishna was to just give us that understanding without us showing the signs that we truly wanted, which is, I'm talking about Krishna all the time. I'm serving Krishna. I'm devoting my life to serve Krishna. To your other point, Krishna will then know the extent to which he can start giving us that understanding, and it reciprocates accordingly, not taking our free will away, because we are first saying, hey, Krishna, I truly love you. And now he's giving us something. And the more we give him, the more he gives us. So yeah, it's a perfect system. I'm glad you pointed that out.
Yeah, the idea of free will is just comes up again and again. I like it. I love addressing this topic whenever it comes up. So
Yeah. And then 11, which I believe to be one of the most poetic verses of the entire Gita. And again, Krishna again showing what he does for us and how he does it, and his reciprocation, right? He then says, to show them special mercy. So them here are the devotees, right? That are thinking and talking about Krishna all of the time and serving him with love. To show them, special mercy, I, dwelling in their hearts, destroy with the shining lamp of knowledge the darkness born of ignorance. That's just so beautiful. It's just so well put, so eloquently said. and it captures exactly what's going on, is the darkness of ignorance rather than evil, rather than hell,
Mm.
rather than a demon, a devil that exists in hell and constantly torments us or instigate us to do the wrong thing. No, it is just the ignorance that is within you, the ignorance, the darkness of ignorance within you. What ignorance? Ignorance of me, ignorance of Krishna, ignorance that I am that from which everything comes and everything emanates from me. So nothing belongs to us, everything belongs to Krishna because everything comes from Krishna. If we all had that one understanding, there would be world peace. World peace is such a cliche thing because everybody's like, oh, I want world peace. All right, how are you going to go about it? How are you going to convince all the world leaders that they should just not invest in their military anymore and rather just be peaceful? How are we going to do that? It is rather ridiculous to think that we're going to accomplish world peace in this day and age. I have no hopes of that. And yet, it's something, it seems like a fairy tale, world peace. But let's consider if we all understood that everything on this planet, including the oil, belongs to Krishna. It is not even ours. And we would therefore treat it with respect and share it with our brothers and sisters because then we have a common father. We have a common father and mother. And we therefore are all brothers and sisters, even though in different bodies they look differently, we all have the same source. And that same source owns everything. It is just being borrowed to us. So wouldn't that get rid of all of our greed? Isn't it greed that is causing war in the Middle East? Isn't it, are we fighting over things that we believe belongs to us or to our ideology, to our group, as opposed to the other group and the other ideology, and then we fight over that? Isn't that the cause of all wars and sufferings that we see in the world? And with that one understanding, and that therefore causes hell on earth, that is us. We're ignorant to this fact, and we are saying, no, it's mine, this is my oil, this is my ideology, and then we fight against the other group. And so Krishna is saying, hey, you know what, with the shining lamp of knowledge that everything is mine, everything emanates from me, okay? If you, with that knowledge, that shining lamp of knowledge, I'm going to destroy the darkness born out of ignorance in your heart, and you're going to realize that. And then when you realize that, you become who you always were, loving, clear, peaceful, compassionate soul, eternal. And then you can go back to him. And so Krishna says to show them his special mercy, I, dwelling in their hearts, destroy with the shining lamp of knowledge the darkness of ignorance. And another point is, where is Krishna? He's in our hearts. Is that a metaphor? Is that literally? Like, what do we do out of that? Like, if Krishna is in my heart, like, I thought that was just blood in my heart. Is it Krishna literally there? Yes. We've been, our scriptures and our teachers are teaching us constantly. This is to be taken literal. Krishna is actually there. It is called Paramatma. There's Atma, which is us. The Sanskrit word Atma can mean the soul. It can mean other things as well, but it can mean the soul, and that's us. So Mahatma, as in Mahatma Gandhi, Maha means great, Atma means soul. Mahatma means a great soul, like a great person. But we are Atma. Paramatma, para means above and beyond in Sanskrit. So Paramatma means that super soul, not just a regular soul, but the super soul. So Atma, the soul, us, we are found in the heart. A lot of science nowadays believe that consciousness, well, they don't even know what consciousness is, but granted that they knew what consciousness was, they think that consciousness is in the head, because it feels like I'm thinking with my head and this is where my consciousness is. But spiritualists, people like us, we say no, like the soul is responsible for consciousness. Consciousness is a symptom of the soul, and that soul is in the heart, physically located in the region of the heart. That's where the soul is, not in the brain, but in the heart. And so is Krishna as Paramatma. Krishna is right there, right next to us. I think this is a significant point because it means that Krishna truly never left us. Krishna never left us alone. It is just that due to our own desires that do not include Krishna and the fact that we have free will, Krishna allows us to have this experience that Krishna is not around. But he is, he has never left us. He's right next to us in the region of our hearts. And he's making the point here to show them special mercy, I dwelling in their hearts. Literally, that's where Krishna is. Destroy with the shining lamp of knowledge the darkness born out of ignorance. And that's just so beautiful to me.
Yeah, that's a really good point about bringing up Krishna's residence, so to speak, in our hearts. To think that no matter what we do, he's there. He'll never leave, just waiting, residing with us. We're never alone. And the idea that no, we're talking literally in our hearts. It's quite different from at least all of the religious philosophy that I grew up with. It's really comforting. And I also like how you really stressed the ignorance part versus the evil part. We've talked a lot about, the problem of evil. Where does evil come from? And how everyone can look at the world and the suffering and blame it on evil, some, undefinable thing that just came out of hell or wherever it comes from. But as you said, it can all be traced to us, individual people's choices and the results of that, and how it's just kind of based in ignorance. I like that a lot.
Yes, absolutely. And so it's quite metaphysical, right, to say that us, the soul, Atma, is in the region of the heart, and the soul is Krishna. It's a little bit metaphysical, but we do have tales of heart surgeons that will do a heart transplant, and so patient in need of a heart transplant. And before I move on, let's be clear. I'm not trying to imply that the soul can be dragged out of you if you take your heart out. The soul is spiritual. Uh, like Krishna said in the Gita earlier, fire cannot burn the soul. Water cannot moisten the soul. The wind cannot blow the soul away. So these things are matter. Spirit, which is what souls are made out of, it's above and beyond this. It cannot be touched by any matter, right? However, I'm discussing more about this metaphysical region. Let's say your chakra, your heart chakra, right? This energy, the center, the heart center of our body. And you, Krim, you have a lot of experience with energies of the body, the chakras, and so on. So I'll be interested in hear what you have to say about this. I have heard and seen, like even you can see it for yourself on YouTube, patients when they are in need of heart transplant and they have an open heart surgery and their heart is taken out and a new heart is put in, and the patient survives and the surgery is successful, that patient lives many more years, but their families will say that the person is never the same, that they have changed, their personality is different, their and again, not really things connected to your physical. Let's say, well, you have a weak heart now, so you used to be a triathlete, but then now you don't do that anymore. It's like, well, you can trace that to the conditions of your heart. Your heart has weakened, and you cannot do a triathlon as you used to be able to do in the past. Not that. Talking about psychology, like subtle matter, like your personality changed. And a lot of people have that experience when they have a heart transplant. And it points to this because, again, currently atheist scientists believe that consciousness is chemical reactions in the brain. But we know different. We know that actually consciousness is a symptom of the soul being present in the body. That's why when the soul leaves, we bury the body because there's no more use for the body when the soul leaves because there's no more consciousness there. And so that consciousness is coming from the heart. That's where the soul is. And consciousness is a symptom of the soul being in the heart. And consciousness ultimately comes from the heart. And when there's such a drastic change of heart, it even shows up in people's psychology. Again, it doesn't impact, it doesn't mean that the soul was dragged out and there's somebody else's soul now in your heart, in your new heart, in your body. But you're messing with that realm, with the region of the body, which is so sacred. That chakra, the heart chakra, it's being changed. And there's an impact there, even though it's subtle matter, is actually carrying out. And then it is being manifested in the material world too. People's personality change when they have a heart transplant. What do you think about that, Kim? With your given your experience with healing and through energy and chakras and so on, what do you think about that?
It's interesting. I'm not familiar with a lot of that data. Easily believable that a personality would change. My mom had a kidney transplant when she was in her 40s. And so I did not experience a drastic personality change in her after that. But based on what you said, I can definitely see how putting something physical in a person from another person would carry a lot of energy based on that person's life. Things come into our at a cellular level. They're proving that things like phobias or fears of the Holocaust can be sent down through the generations through biology. And so when you add someone else's genetics into your body, yeah, the blood type might be the same, but you can't help but wonder what is that item holding at a genetic level that's now going to come into the mix of your spiritual body. And so I see the chakras as kind of these energy vortexes, these spots that are always with us, as you said, as long as your consciousness is with you. And so when that metaphysical energy interacts with at the physical level, yeah, I could see how that could be very disruptive, because now that your vortex is now not only interacting with your physical genetics, now it's interacting with another physical DNA that carries with it its own set of energies.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really interesting to ponder, though.
Yes. From this both perspectives, also from the perspective that when we accept that we are the soul and that we are our residence in the body is the region of the heart, and that Krishna is also right there and dwelling in the heart, because he's saying here, that's where I am, dwelling in their hearts. He conveys this other point, right? That Krishna never left us. He's right there next to us. And right there where he needs to be, dwelling in the heart with the shining lamp of knowledge, the knowledge of himself, that he's everything and that everything emanates from him. Once we know that, our ignorance will be gone. Everything is Krishna. And we should love him and talk about him. All right. So that's that's text 11, the last of the four texts, which the four verses, which is supposed to be the summary of the Gita. And then there's Arjuna's reaction. And I know we're getting a little bit of time. We are covering two classes, but we are also getting a little bit of time here. I think we can read Arjuna's reaction. And it's such a nice point here, because Arjuna is going to react to this, and then Krishna continues. And then the rest of the chapter, which we haven't started yet in class, it's is very, very beautiful. And in Arjuna's reaction is a perfect bridge between Krishna summarizing what he's spoken thus far in these four verses, and then Arjuna saying, okay, and then tell me more. And then Krishna continues. So this is Arjuna's reaction here. Arjuna said, "You are the supreme personality of Godhead, the ultimate abode, the purest, the absolute truth. You are the eternal, transcendental, original person, the unborn, the greatest. All the great sages, such as Narada, Asita, Devala, and Vyas, confirmed this truth about you. And now you yourself are declaring it to me. O Krishna, I totally accept as truth all that you have told me. Neither the demigods nor the demons, O Lord, can understand your personality. Indeed, you alone know yourself by your own internal potency, O Supreme Person, origin of all, Lord of all beings, God of gods, Lord of the universe. Please tell me in details of your divine opulences by which you pervade all these worlds. O Krishna, O Supreme Mystic, how shall I constantly think of you, and how shall I know you? In what various forms are you to be remembered, O Supreme Personality of Godhead? O Janardana, which is a way to address Krishna. O Janardana, again, please describe in details the mystic power of your opulences. I am never satiated in hearing about you. For the more I hear, the more I want to taste the nectar of your words. So that was Arjuna's reaction to all this. What do you think about that, Kim?
I thought it was so poetic for one, but also just such a wonderful demonstration of, oh, he gets it. And now he gets it. He wants to know more. And it was just such a beautiful testimonial to Krishna, an expression of love. He was inspired, just what the verses before were talking about. When he reaches that point of just, I want to know more. This is all I want to talk about. Tell me more. How can I spend more time with you? How can I know you more? It's really beautiful.
Like I'm thinking about that conversation taking place, and Krishna has taught so much. And then he gets to chapter 10, and then he summarizes in those four powerful verses. And then he stops for a moment. And then I can see Arjuna like is bubbling up inside all these feelings of realization and love and so much that must be going on in Arjuna's head. And then Krishna gives that one little pause after summarizing it all nice. And all this Krishna, like I can see Arjuna, right? Like dying to say something, like bubbling up with energy and enthusiasm and realization. And then Krishna gives that one little second, and Arjuna can say something. And what does he say? He says, "You are the Supreme Personality of Godhead." He's just bursting with realization. You are the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the ultimate abode, the purest, the absolute truth. You are the eternal, transcendental, original person, the unborn, the greatest. He's just going all out. And that's that part that I was speaking to about bliss. He's not just satisfied. He's not just sitting there thinking, okay, our Krishna, I got it. You are everything. And then now I know I'm no longer greedy because I know that everything belongs to you. Cool. Namaste. He's like, no, you're the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Like, I cannot contend with this. Like, I've realized that you're the greatest. Everybody knows this. And you're declaring to me, how amazing is that? He's actually in bliss. He's not just satisfied, he's in bliss at that point.
Oh, really nice point. Yeah, of highlighting that difference between satisfaction and bliss. Like, yeah.
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 And then Krishna will continue as per Arjuna's request. He's asking, hey, tell me more and in detail how I can never have enough hearing about you, right? And so tell me more, like, what is it like? How can I taste the nectar of your words? How can I see you in the world? In what form? And then Krishna will answer that in an extraordinary fashion.
Yeah. Wonderful. All right. Well, thank you so much today. It was such a wonderful episode, and these verses are amazing. There's so much in them, and I love Arjuna's response, and I like to live vicariously through him in my neophyte ignorance. But his response is just so natural, so full of emotion and inspiration and bliss, like you said. So.
Well, thank you, Kim. Like we are discussing here, when devotees like you and I aspiring to make progress in our spiritual lives, this is what Krishna is saying we do. We sit here and we talk about him, and we derive great satisfaction and bliss by doing so. And just simply by doing this, Krishna is going to little by little continue to destroy the darkness in our heart with the shining lamp of knowledge. So thank you for the opportunity to do this.
All right. Well, thank you everyone who is listening, and we appreciate it. And if you ever want to contact us, feel free to on our website or social media. And we look forward to talking again next week to see what Krishna's response is. So thank you very much, Tadeo.
Thank you. Haribol.
Haribol.